When the Jarretts began their hostile takeover of the Welch Gulas territory, why didn't the rest of the NWA band together?
Wait a minute. See, he's already framing it like, I already know who the heels and the baby faces are. But anyway, go ahead and read it.
Why didn't the rest of the NWA band together to fight off the, quote, outlaw group, as would normally have been the case?
Well, because actually, Jerry Jarrett didn't actually make a hostile takeover of the Gulas Welch wrestling territory. Jerry Jarrett had been working for Nick Gulas and Roy Welch in Nashville as the booker of the Memphis territory and a main event babyface wrestler for years and years, right? And he actually opened up the cities of Louisville and Evansville up here to the north, and Lexington, Kentucky, and his mother ran those, and he booked those also. So he was actually Nick and Roy's number one revenue generator, if you want to look at it that way. And what had happened was he had thought, Jerry did, that he had purchased part of their company. But he found out when they had a disagreement, and it came to basically, Nick Gulas saying, well, you're going to use my son George in Memphis. And Jerry said, no, we're not, because Memphis is the most profitable town in the territory, and we don't want to kill it like we did Nashville and Birmingham and Chattanooga. He found out that he did not own the part of the company that he thought that he had purchased. So he went and talked to all the wrestlers and said, I'm going to start my own company. And would you like to come with me and work for me instead of Nick Gulas? And with the exception of Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto, like 26 guys said, yes, we're going with you, including Jerry Lawler, the top star in the territory, and Lance Russell, who was the host of the wrestling show and was also the program director at Channel 13. But Lance couldn't leave right away because he was the program director at Channel 13 because Nick Gulas had the contract with Channel 13. So Jarrett had to get another television, which with Lawler and Lance involved, he quickly did with Channel 5. And in the process, Dave Brown came over also. So Channel 5 got the most popular television show in the market, the most popular athlete in the market, the most popular broadcaster in the market, and the most popular news personality in the market, all in the same deal. And the reason why that the NWA didn't support Nick against Jarrett, for probably the only time ever in history that the NWA supported the opposition group, quote unquote, is because whereas Jerry Jarrett was friends with Eddie Graham and Jim Barnett, and some of the most important people in the NWA, and had booked for them and worked for them, Nick was cantankerous and old and out of touch, and he was still doing stuff that he'd done in the 40s when he was the young guy in the group. And not a lot of people were on his side. The Sheik in Detroit sent him talent, and otherwise, that was pretty much the only territory that helped Nick. But the NWA didn't come out and sanction somebody against Nick. They waited until Nick folded up in Memphis and decided to quit running the town, because Jarrett's shows immediately started drawing, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people a week, whereas Nick's within 3 or 4 weeks were down to about 400. So then the NWA sent Jack Briscoe, the champion, Dusty Rhodes, Mike Graham, and Kevin Sullivan from Florida. The Fullers came over from Southeastern Wrestling in Knoxville. Eddie Graham was there backstage, and they had Jarrett's first event as a sole promoter of the Mid-South Coliseum, and validated his promotion in front of everybody by having all those big stars appear on it.
His second part of his question is, I read from someone whose father worked for the Tennessee promotion who says that while it was a successful territory locally, the Memphis/Tennessee territory didn't have much influence nationally until the Jarrett takeover in the 80s. Is this an accurate statement? And if so, what changes were made that broadened the reach of the territory at that time?
I think, yes, actually, even though everybody knew that Memphis was doing huge business in the 70s, but Nick Gulas was a longtime promoter, and Roy Welch had been a pioneer of wrestling. But Roy, by the 70s, was pretty much out of running the business. He had passed the book in Memphis on to Jerry Jarrett when it was controversial. And Nick was kind of running the show, and he was pushing his son George and doing the same stuff he'd done, 30 years before that. He had a very, small territory mentality of cheap talent, cheap cards, cheap television. Not a lot of people aspired to work for Nick Gulas, even though for 30 years he had been operating one of the most successful, in terms of number of tickets sold to live events, one of the most successful territories in the country. But nobody was making any money at it. And that's another way to show how huge a star Jackie Fargo was in Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, and a couple of other places, that he actually made $100,000 working for Nick Gulas in 1972, which is like $7 million in real money. But, Fargo and Al Green had the first sellout of the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum for wrestling. Jackie was figured in. But for the most part, until Jarrett took over, started bringing in a little bit better quality talent. The Channel 5 show was acknowledged as being such a highly rated program, and et cetera, et cetera. Nick operated under the radar for years. He'd bring a big star in, but he'd pay him grudgingly, and usually he got people on the way up or the way down. So that may be why there's not that much notoriety. I do not know.